Hi, everyone. This is Michael Cannon representing TooMedToo. We've got your fix. And today is a special one. It's not the normal live chat that we do. I have best-selling author George Mann with me today.
Hey.
Hey, George.
Hey.
Thanks for coming to the TooMedToo channel.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Okay. I've actually been trying to hook up with you for a little while now, but because of technical difficulties, it's been a little while.
I'm sorry to hear about your laptop.
Well, now I'm broke and have one that's 10 times better.
Well, yeah, that's for the win then, in the long run.
Most people that are going to be watching this know you for this book right here.
Star Wars Myths and Fables, yeah.
This is the one that you wrote that came out recently. I want to get into this book shortly, but first I want you to tell me about some of your other books that you've written.
Sure, yeah. So I've been writing professionally for a long time now. I guess I've got over 50 books in total over the course of the kind of last decade or so. And I started off with a series called Newbury and Hobbs, which is a series that's still running. It's kind of a Victorian fantasy steampunky thing that's I like to call it a kind of a mashup of Sherlock Holmes, Hammer Horror, Doctor Who. It's all the kind of the classic TV that I grew up with in Britain. And from there, I've kind of written supernatural crime novels, the Witchwood series. I've written some Doctor Who, including a book about the War Doctor during the Time War, John Hurt's incarnation, which proved quite popular. And lots of comics recently as well in recent years. So Doctor Who comics, Dark Souls, based on the video game, some original stuff based on Newbury and Hobbs as well. A Star Wars comic fairly recently as well. So yeah, quite a back catalogue of books really, and it's only in the last year or so that I've started writing Star Wars.
Yeah, I knew about the Star Wars comic. That's an adventure book.
Yes, yeah, it's one of the IDW Star Wars adventures. Yeah,
it was geared more towards, I guess, a younger crowd.
They call it all ages, so it's
Okay.
It's appropriate for youngsters as well as older readers as well. That's the theory behind.
Now you had some Doctor Who in there. You also had some Sherlock Holmes.
That's right. Yeah. So I've written 2 Sherlock Holmes novels and edited 4 anthologies of Sherlock Holmes short stories as well, original short stories, by myself and other writers.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I stopped reading when I was a little kid, and well, not a little kid, probably a teenager, and was one of those kids that I got the Cliff's Notes at school, and whatever I had to do to not to read. And I didn't start reading again until recently. In the last year and a half, a little less than 2 years, I've read all of the canon Star Wars novels. So when I say read, I do Audible.
Yeah, I love Audible as well. I do that with a lot of Star Wars books, actually.
And it's great. Well, that also makes it more of a show or an event. So pretty much the only books I've read, they were all Star Wars books, except for a couple I read for school. Recently, one from another Star Wars author that I only knew him as a Star Wars author, and I read his book, and it was amazing.
Fab. I think that's one of the great things about as a writer coming to something like Star Wars, because aside from the fact, and I'm sure we'll probably get onto these sorts of topics later, but aside from the fact it's a huge honor to write Star Wars, it also it kind of opens you up as a writer to a fan base of people who obviously the people at Lucasfilm have deemed you a writer suitable for writing Star Wars, that there's something in the way you write that matches Star Wars, and I guess what you hope is that readers are going to read and enjoy your Star Wars book, and perhaps look at some of your other books and think, well, if I enjoyed this book by that writer, I might enjoy some of their other work as well.
Yeah, the caliber of work that's coming out of the Star Wars writers or the books is amazing. If the EU would have been like this, nothing against EU authors, but I probably would have been reading all along.
I think we're in a we're lucky. We're in a golden age of Star Wars at the moment with all the new movies, all the TV stuff that's coming, and the literature as well. And I'm a fan of the EU books. I haven't read them all, but I've dipped in. I've read a fair few, and there's lots to love about those books. But I think what Disney are doing at the moment is really interesting in the way that they're managing the canon going forward, with all the books and the movies and the TV and animated series all tying together, and video games as well, all tying together. Means that for people who want to go deeper, it's all there. You can totally immerse yourself in this stuff, which is a dream come true as a fanboy.
Oh yeah, definitely. Now, were you a Star Wars fan growing up, or?
Yeah. No, I was a card carrying Star Wars fan. I mean,
okay.
The first movie I remember seeing for Star Wars movie was Empire Strikes Back at the cinema with my granddad, and from that point on, that was it. I had all the action figures, the sticker books, and I was reading like Splinter of the Mind's Eye. As soon as I was old enough to read it, I read it, and from that point on, that fantastic wealth of Star Wars stuff that was just coming out constantly, and so I was there waiting when the prequel trilogy came. I was queuing for the cinemas, I'm a lifelong Star Wars fan.
Okay. Yeah, that's great, because what I like to see, and what I've actually been seeing a lot of, whether it's actors or the people that are actually making the content now, like Filoni, Favreau, and the people that are in the Lucasfilm team, pretty much from top to bottom. It's not just they're going to a job; they're Star Wars fans, and this is, like a dream coming true to them.
Yeah, I think everyone I talk to connected to Star Wars loves Star Wars, and I think it's actually true of kind of a lot of media that's happening these days. Like things that were cool in the 80s that we grew up with, all those people are now the people in charge of making stuff. So that's why we get things like Stranger Things, with this 80s nostalgia in it. Things like Terminator is back. I know it never really went away, but it's James Cameron is back doing Terminator. I think there's this real kind of we were fans as kids of kind of a lot of this stuff, Star Wars being at the heart of a lot of it, and now we're the generation who are making all this new content, and we're going back to the things that were touchstones for us and the things that we loved as kids and adults, yeah, it's great. It's wonderful to see. It's the same with Doctor Who. The people who are making it now were fans when they were kids, and very, very true of Star Wars. It is a thing crafted out of love, definitely.
Now, you said earlier you started writing when you were about 18.
Yeah, originally.
Did you like to write like when you were going to school?
Yeah.
Was that something you always wanted to be a writer? Was that your?
I'm not sure.
Did you wanted to be a policeman and just ended up having to end up writing?
I'm not sure I ever knew what I wanted to do at first. I used to, when I was a kid, I used to write books. I used to write like fold paper, like inserts, and write and draw terrible pictures, and write stories. And I had a particular recurring character called Noof the Caveman, and I wrote quite a lot of stories about him. And I guess I knew I loved books, and I knew that I wanted to work in books, but I wasn't sure. I mean, I think it would always seem like too far of a dream to be able to write them myself, professionally. So when I was 15, I got a job in a bookstore, just as a kind of weekend job, carting around crates of books, putting books on the shelves, restocking the shelves. And I stayed with that. I worked long summers, and as I kind of got into my late teens, I took holiday jobs, Christmas jobs, in the same store, and eventually made it a full-time career. Started managing a store, moved home, moved to the Midlands, got a bigger store, and from there eventually moved into publishing. So I was kind of on the other side of the fence, genre publishing, working for Games Workshop and their Warhammer brand, and the Black Library, which is their novel imprint. I kind of ran that for a number of years, and at the same time, parallel to that, my writing career was growing really. So I started writing when I was about 18. First published book when I was 21. Then I left it that was kind of a non-fiction book, and I left it a few years while I kind of worked out what I really wanted to write. And then I think it was 2008, my first full-length novel came out. So it was about 10 years ago.
When was it, or how was it that you approached Disney, or Disney approached you?
So I was really lucky in this that they approached me. I'd written a book, I think I mentioned earlier, called Witchwood, which is like a supernatural horror police procedural. So it's kind of a murder mystery, but it's got this core of pagan mythology running through it. Michael Siglain, who's the creative director of Lucasfilm Publishing, I'd met him at San Diego Comic-Con. We'd hit it off just socially. And I didn't realize, but he followed me on Twitter. He saw that my new book was out, thought it was his cup of tea, bought it, read it. So when I next bumped into him, which was at New York Comic Con a few months later, he kind of said, "Oh, I read your book," which was, and we got talking about it. And he said, "That kind of mythology that you've put in there, it's all kind of about this Saxon character and his kind of apostles." And he said, "Was that based on real mythology, or was that something that you made up?" And I said, "Well, no, it's fictional. I created it all." And he kind of just looked at me and went, "Would you be interested in doing some of that for Star Wars?" And I nearly dropped my pint. Mouth hanging open. So yeah, as you can imagine, I bit his hand off, and that's how the book came about. It's kind of, he'd read my fiction, and it was his idea to kind of put the two things together and to do a book of Star Wars folklore. But it was so up my alley that it was Star Wars and it was mythology, and they're the two things that kind of for me are kind of big touchstones. So yeah, I went for it in a big way.
Okay. And then after it was pretty much known that you were gonna tackle a book, did you know it was going to be a bunch of short stories, or did you think it was? Did they tell you up front what they were looking at, or did you know?
Yeah, we talked it over, and in thinking about the type of story we wanted to tell, essentially the stories that Luke and Leia might have heard as kids, or that are permeating the bars and cantinas of Star Wars, that kind of thing. These looking at what do normal people think about Jedi, and how do those stories get turned into things that they might be able to relate to. So we knew from the off that we wanted to do a number of stories, kind of a bit like Grimm's fairy tales or Aesop's fables, kind of these stories that have got like a moral core to them, and they say something hopefully about the Star Wars experience, but from a fictional point of view.
That was one of the things I wanted to bring up, because I love the book. I thought it was amazing. The illustrations, I love those too. I actually wish there was more of them in there.
Yeah, me too. Grant he's such an amazing talent, and I am so lucky that he brought these stories to life in the way he did. I would be working on the stories because I'd done detailed outlines, and from those outlines, Grant was doing his art while I was writing the actual story.
Okay.
So I was getting through these pictures that he was doing, initial sketches, and then worked up sketches, and then the final signed off pieces. They're coming through as I'm writing the stories about them, and it was just such an inspiration to see these ideas that I'd put onto the page coming to life as if they were real Star Wars things. That's the cool thing for me, and also to see that what Grant's done with the artwork is what we were trying to do with the words in the book, which is everything's seen through that mythological lens. So, you know, it's Vader, but it's Vader as the bogeyman to people who don't understand what the Sith and the Empire is.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why he looks a bit different. He's a bit scary, and you know, and he's got this arm of light and these ribs on his armor, and it's just amazing to see Grant's work like that. So, yeah, I feel very privileged to have worked with him on the book.
Well, because that was one of the things that about your book. You know, when we heard myths and fables, we were thinking, we knew it was going to be Star Wars, but it was going to be happy endings like Snow White and Cinderella and everything. And you know, you go and you're reading the book, and it's you know, geared towards children, even though, you know, as a Star Wars, it's geared towards children, but it's still meant for adults at the same time, or kind of a thing, because you're reading the book and all of a sudden it ends and it's like, but wait, that's not happy. That's not how it's supposed to be. You know, so was that more of a, like, the Grimm's fairy tale influence on that?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I tried to do a bit of kind of groundwork, and I went back to a lot of the myths I'd read as a child, and I went back to Grimm's fairy tales, and actually was really shocked to go back after all these years and read them and see how sinister they are.
They're
properly, I mean, grim with one M. You know, Hansel and Gretel, and the witch trying to cook them in the oven, and then they get their own back on her and lock her in the oven and cook her. And I mean, it's pretty scary stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, they the way that they wrote those, Disney adapted a lot of them, or stories around that time, and made them nice and fluffy, and that's what we think they are. I'd say the vast majority of us think that they're, you know, the fairy tales are always happy and fluffy, and you know, something along those lines. And you read them, and no, it's a lot of death and violence and graphic. They made, I think, if I recall, I think a few years ago, it could have been 10 years ago, I don't really know. I think they made a movie based on a lot of the fairy tales, really kind of put them all together.
Grim. Yeah, I haven't seen it actually.
I don't think it did very well, because it was like the original stories told, and we weren't expecting it. I think I saw it, but it was a long time ago. I don't really remember if it was a good movie or not, or you know, what I was expecting for it to be. But yeah, it's just, you know, it's a completely different world, and your book kind of ends up in the middle of that. So
yeah, I mean, I wanted to make it feel like it had that hint of Grimm's about it, that, you know, there was some pretty sinister stuff going on, but also it needed to be suitable for kids, modern kids, as well as like we said before, I was kind of aiming for an all ages audience. And of course, I mean, you know, the stories we're writing for the next one, Dark Legends, is they're dark legends. You can imagine you take the darkest stories in myths and fables and add a bit.
Now, you said that you were, you know, a fanboy. Did you read a lot of Star Wars before you wrote this, or?
Yeah, I did. A lot of the comics. So when I was a kid, we used to get UK reprints of the Marvel comics, which were in like a larger format newsprint thing, and I had a lot of those as a kid. And then over the years, I've dipped into the EU, and I say I've not read everything. I'd love to have, but I just haven't had the capacity. But I've dipped into quite a lot of EU stuff, and then I'm trying to keep up with the canon books. I'm a little bit behind at the moment, but I'm enjoying what I'm reading, so I keep coming back to them and trying to kind of catch up. So, and all the comics, I'm reading the new Marvel comics as well.
I'm pretty much caught up on all the canon books. I mean, I'm up to date with the last one that Rebecca Roanhouse did, and I don't know if you read that.
Not yet.
That's amazing. You know, it's weird because, like I was saying, the quality of the books, Bloodline and Lost Stars, and the ones that everyone goes to for their favorites. But you know, you have Dark Disciple. You know, I mean, you could sit there and name all the books, and you know, like I'm thinking, like I'm getting like happy, I'm getting emotional right now about like, oh man, that was so great, and this and that. Just thinking about the different books, because it's like, me as someone that wasn't really a book reader, except for what I'm reading now. You equate them to movies. There's different kind of movies.
Yeah.
Different levels. You have dramas that are serious dramas. You have dramas that are a little bit kind of more mellow. You don't have comedies or anything like that. They're all Star Wars books are all along the same line, but they're different spectrums of the line of where they are, whether it's heavy canon, you need to know this, or if it's a lot of, like, right now, the things that are coming out supplementing, or the Galaxy Edge books like this one. You don't need to read this book to be able to watch the movie.
No.
You don't really need to read the novels to watch the movies, but it really helps to enjoy them, especially with, I don't want to spoil it for you, so I'm not going to say anything about this last book, but it just, it touches on a little bit of everything. And I think it's a book that we really needed, to kind of to tie everything together before we have the last of the, what they're calling the last of the saga. But
yeah. I'm really looking forward to it. It's as soon as I finish the book I'm on with, that's my next kind of one to target.
What book are you reading right now?
I'm reading a big fantasy novel by a guy called Ian Cameron Esselmont, and he writes a series called Novels of the Malazan Empire, and there's it's really interesting actually, because he and his friend, another writer, Stephen Erickson, created this Malazan world together. They're both archaeologists, and when they were younger, they created this world for their role playing games. And consequently, they've both gone away and written a series of novels set in this world. And they've got characters that cross over between their books and things. And they're fantastic. They're really, really good. Very kind of, the world building is incredible. So I'm thoroughly enjoying those. So every now and then I treat myself to one of those, but they're like 1,000 pages each. So they're quite hefty. Take me a while to fit in around work. So every now and then I'll treat myself to one of those, and then I'll go and read a number of kind of more regular sized books, and then I'll come back to one of those again. So that's kind of in my routine this year.
Getting back to your book, what was with the tie-ins, because it's the Galaxy's Edge book, I guess the restrictions or the instructions that were given, how was that with your book?
It was a great experience actually. So I mean, so the Galaxy's Edge stories, there's two Bacta stories in the book. We treated them slightly differently because at the time, I mean, the parks weren't open. So I was very privileged to get the information through from Lucasfilm to say this is what Bacta is going to be like. This is the work we've done on the background of Bacta, and it was. I mean, it's incredible. Again, the world building on show. It wasn't like a 5-page document. It was like a 100-page document. This is the history of Bacta, and it wasn't. I mean, there weren't really any restrictions. It was more. They gave me that information. And they said absorb it and come back to us with some ideas for stories that leap out at you. What jumps out at you from reading this that inspires you to tell a fable or a mythological type story on Bacta? So I kind of went back with outlines and ideas for a few stories. I mean, this is how we did the book. I put in maybe, I don't know, there's 9 stories in the book. I think I put 20 story ideas in, and we picked the ones that Lucasfilm liked best, that felt worked best. And it was the same with the Bacta. So there's a few extra ideas in there, and they picked these ones and said, right, develop those ideas. So then kind of I worked them up into more detailed outlines. So, this is what I want to do with the story. And I passed it back. And my editor, Caitlin Kennedy, looked through it and gave me some notes, and the Lucasfilm story group look at it and they give me some notes. And in the case of the Bacta ones, the guys who work at the Disney Imagineering would look at it and give me some notes. And then I would write the story incorporating any notes and feedback that I had. But really, they were incredibly encouraging. It wasn't really about restriction. It was about enabling. How could they enable me to tell the best stories that I could? And of course, they didn't want me to get stuff wrong, to misrepresent Star Wars. But actually, I think partly because we were telling them kind of through this mythological lens, I had a lot of freedom, a lot more than, you know. And I've worked with a number of franchises over the years, and different IPs, different brands, and I expected Star Wars to be really restrictive, and it's not at all. It's not. It's they welcomed me in and said, you know, actually, you know, have you thought about doing putting Vader in that story? You know, and you go, wow, and encouraging you to kind of go, yeah, push it as far as you want to push it, and then we'll tell you, you know, if you go too far. Right, so it wasn't kind of conservative with a small c. It was they really, I mean, they were really backing the idea, and they wanted me to tell these kind of stories that felt like they had some real resonance within the Star Wars universe. So, and that was from the guys at Galaxy's Edge through Story Group through the editorial team. So yeah, I would say that's kind of how the process works. It was me initially going, right, here's a bunch of ideas, and sometimes it would be a cool image, or sometimes it would be, you know, oh, we like how you've done a George and the Dragon style story with, you know, Obi-Wan and Tatooine. That's cool. Let's push that one and follow that, that kind of thing. I think the only initial guidance I had was like, we've got to do Vader as the boogeyman. That was kind of the, and why wouldn't you? So yeah.
You made dragons canon, so you know, I mean, that's pretty much out there with one of the most extreme things, and it's not something crazy like whales in space, but you know, it actually kind of makes sense. But
I was over the moon with, I mean, I can't believe what they let me get away with, really. Like creating a new Sith, Darth Kaldoth, you know, doing things like that. For me, as a fan of Star Wars, a long-term fan of Star Wars, to be able to contribute something like that to the Star Wars universe, it's phenomenal. It's just such a privilege.
Did you have a lot of challenges though, like writing into the universe, because you had the fictional setting that you were adding to, and you were, like I said, the dragon. No one would have ever thought there was dragons in Star Wars, because there's just not. Dragons aren't Star Wars. There would be some kind of other creature or monster, but why can't there be dragons? So was that a problem or a challenge for you?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I guess having worked on the other side of the fence as a publisher for a company that has a very rich and deep kind of universe with the Warhammer universe, I always used to advise writers who were writing for the Black Library that the key thing is to get the tone right. It's all about tone. If it looks and feels and sounds like Warhammer, it is Warhammer. And you know, the rest of it can be massaged. The details can, you know, an editor can help you if you get your facts wrong, but they can't help you if you get the tone wrong. And so that's kind of the way I've always approached things like Doctor Who and Dark Souls and Warhammer, and I just took that approach to Star Wars. And you know, and I think Star Wars is like most of us who are big fans. It's ingrained within us. We kind of, something feels quintessentially Star Wars or it doesn't. And I guess what I wanted to do first and foremost was make them feel like Star Wars stories. That, you know, make them feel like they did exist in that universe. And then it was like, you know, they used the example of the dragon. It was keying off what's already there as well. I mean, you know, the Krayt Dragon in Star Wars and Obi-Wan, you know, it just seemed so obvious to me to go, well, I've got to tell the story of Obi-Wan and the Krayt Dragon. Now, you know, but to do it from the point of view of the Sand People, that's the interesting thing as well, because you're not then going, this is a story of Obi-Wan told from an omniscient kind of point of view, or from Obi-Wan's point of view. This is how the Sand People down the line have interpreted the story, not the people who were there, but the people generations later. This is the story that's told about this guy who saved this village of Sand People from a crate dragon. And you know, there's I like to think with these myths that they're seen through that lens. They're seen through that generational lens. Chinese whispers has happened. The stories have mutated and changed over time, but there's a kernel of truth in them in terms of canon. So did Obi-Wan ever save a village of Sand People from a crate dragon? I'd like to think he did. Did it happen exactly how it's described in that story? Well, it's gone through years of oral tradition and fireside telling, and it's changed and been embellished. So then you leave it to people to decide. Well, what really happened? Something happened, but what really happened? And for some of them, it's they're a bit more. The story's a bit clearer than it is in others. So you look at something like Gaze of Stone, the Darth Calder story, and you can look at that and go, well, all these events probably happened. And then you look at that one with Obi-Wan and the Crate Dragon, clearly something like that happened, but did the dragon have wings or didn't it? Do crate dragons have wings? It's that.
Mm-hmm.
That's. And I'm not saying those things aren't canon, and I'm not saying they are. That's the beauty of mythology. It's kind of like you can play around with that concept and just go, what worked? What's the best way to tell a story? What's going to work as a story? And also how do you make it interesting and a bit different? So it's not just like every other Star Wars story that's been told. How do you put a different spin on it and do something that feels like it's a story that could exist in that world, that universe? I keep looking off camera. It's because I've got a copy of the book here.
I think I said, like, I might have missed it, but I don't think they ever said, or it was ever mentioned, who these people are, the myths. Like you keep saying Obi-Wan, we just know him as the Knight.
Yeah.
Has it ever been said that he's actually Obi-Wan, or is it someone that resembles Obi-Wan, or someone that resembles Darth Vader? General Grievous is in here, but it doesn't come out and say he's General Grievous. So
some are obvious and some that aren't. So yeah, I mean, it never says it's Obi-Wan. I guess it's got a picture of a guy fighting a dragon with a lightsaber with two moons on a sandy planet, and it talks about Tatooine and the Crate Dragon, and they kind of go, it's.
I already showed you. I got mine here.
Yeah, so it's implied it's Obi-Wan. And General Grievous, I mean, you see him in the artwork. It's General Grievous. Same with Vader, of course. Others, there are original characters in there, like Darth Caldoth, right? And then there are others that, I have an idea who it is. I've maybe talked it through with Story Group about who it could be, like the Wanderer, but it's not explicit. So and I like the fact that it doesn't that people don't know because it adds to the mythology. It adds to that feeling that it's folklore. So I think that it's where it's not clear, it's whoever you want it to be. I think that's the beauty of telling stories in this way. So if you look at that picture and you see and you read that story and you think, oh, it has to be that character. Well, maybe it is that character. Maybe it's not. Some of them are like Shelish and Awachi, the Night Sister and the Wookiee. They're from Star Wars Uprising. So their characters not that many people know, but they are Star Wars characters, existing Star Wars characters.
Well, I was going to ask you if we knew who that Wookiee was. Because we didn't. This wasn't really talked about. That wasn't one of the ones, as far as I know, in the Star Wars community I'm involved in, or heard anything about it being Chewbacca. Where the other ones were, that's Obi-Wan, that's Darth Vader, that's Grievous, that's Rey. The whole speculation part is fun. When Crash of Fate came out and finished that, and I was having a little bit of insomnia, and I was laying there, and somebody, and the Twitterverse said, "Hey, I just finished Crash of Fate. Does anybody want to talk?" And I said, "Hey, what's going on?" and we spent 4 or 5 hours going off on a tangent on the boy that's in Crash of Fate. Is he the boy in the book that's coming out, the next book that's coming out?
Yeah, I think people genuinely love the fact that fans engage so deeply with the material. It's and I don't think it's ever an annoyance. I think it's more just they can't. It would be a full-time job just to answer people's queries if that's what they did. So they can't do it constantly for everyone. That's all. That that's certainly. I mean, I shouldn't speak for other people, but that's certainly my perception of the situation. That people genuinely seem to kind of take enjoyment out of the fact that fans are engaging so much with the books and the comics and the films, that are being put out.
We're gonna wrap this up shortly. I don't want to keep you forever. I'm very gracious to be able to
forever in England.
talk to you. But you have another Star Wars book coming up in the works?
Yeah. So
are you allowed to talk about that at all?
A little. Just what we've announced so far, really. So it's called Dark Legends. I think the plan is to launch it around Halloween time next year.
Okay.
It's follow up to Myths and Fables. So we got to the end of writing these, and we'd had such fun doing them. We just didn't want to stop, basically. But the spin this time is that they're darker stories. Dark Legends. It's we're looking at the dark side of the Force. We're looking at Sith and kind of spooky stories. Expect more Grimm's fairy tales, sort of stuff. I mean, the first story, the one we talked about at New York Comic Con, is it's one of those things. Like I was saying before, there were some obvious things to me, like the Jordan the Dragon type story, on Tatooine. Darth Vader's the boogeyman. One of the ones that immediately appealed to me was the Grand Inquisitor as Nosferatu. So that's kind of what the first story is about. It's like a lonely orphanage, in the years following the Clone Wars, where kids have been sent who've lost their parents during the Clone Wars, and there's a creepy stories going around amongst the kids about this terrifying thing that comes sometimes at night through the window and steals off with the special or strange children. We follow a girl who arrives at the orphanage and hears these stories and doesn't believe them at first, and then comes to see the Grand Inquisitor appearing to steal Force-sensitive children. And then the story follows what happens, which I won't spoil the end. But that's the type of story we're looking at.
Because I think, I mean, that's great. There's so many stories, especially from going off of Clone Wars itself, that you could probably write 10 books, or like you said, you wrote 20 stories for the first one, 9 of them made it in. Where are the other 11? Are they ever going to see the light of day?
A couple of them have made it into the next book.
Okay.
So, I mean, they're not. They were never fully worked up stories. They were story ideas, and we picked the 9 that for this one that we wanted to. You'll see some of them. You'll see some of those other stories make it, and in other cases not. Where we went actually. I had ideas that there were better ideas that went into the book, and Dark Legends needed new stories that were darker. So as I said, there was a couple that we used that had new versions of the ideas that were originally pitched for Myths and Fables, and then a whole bunch of new ideas. Sorry, your dog's appeared on the screen. Mine started barking in the background. I do apologise.
Yeah, mine. Here's my little baby.
Oh.
Hi. Say hi to everybody.
Hey.
See, I need to put her on in the beginning of the video so people actually watch them.
Very cute. So I can't really talk more about the content of Dark Legends, but if you liked Myths and Fables and you like the darkest elements of Myths and Fables, you'll enjoy Dark Legends.
I definitely did. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but this book came out at the same time as Crash of Fate.
Yeah.
And I was waiting for Crash of Fate and Crash of Fate and Crash of Fate because it was an Audible book, so I'm going to get it first. That when I got the delivery for Myths and Fables, I was like, "What's this book?" I knew that it was coming, but it got read the same day, and right through them. Both, I got two Star Wars books done in one day, which is
pretty impressive. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's shows what kind of life I have sometimes, I guess.
So that's kind of where we're at. Yeah, and hopefully it's I'll get to I'll keep writing this stuff as long as they'll have me. So hopefully there's I can do more in the future. But that's the wonderful thing about Star Wars, is that it encompasses all of those different types of stories. You can tell any type of story in the Star Wars universe, and that way it can appeal to any type of person, anyone's particular tastes.
Oh yeah, definitely. If you're open-minded and positive, there's more Star Wars than you can actually consume right now that you probably haven't caught up. You're not caught up with everything, unless you read every comic book when it came out. And even then, there's just so much.
I use Marvel U. You know Marvel U?
I do.
Marvel U goes up to everything up to 6 months ago. So it's running 6 months behind the current comics. And that's all included in your subscription. So that's how I kind of, I stay as close up to date as I can. But I love those.
Well, George.
Yeah.
I think that just about does it for today.
It's been a pleasure.
I would definitely love to talk to you again some other time.
Sure, anytime.
Maybe before your other book comes out. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you for having me, and we'll talk again.
That was George Mann. I hope you had a great time listening to us chat. He's a wonderful guy, great author. Go out and pick up some of his stuff. Just go to Audible and pick up a book and, listen to it while you're on your way to work or on the train or doing the dishes. All right. With that, I said good day. And may the force be with you.